Let me begin by saying the purpose of rebasing the inflation.
All right.
The purpose is to reflect the dynamic change in the economy. Economies evolve over time. There's need to reflect it in the economic parameter or variables so that we can have up-to-date data.
Inflation rates dropped, right? So does this drop in inflation mean things are now cheaper for the everyday Nigerian?
The consumption pattern changed, not that the price has significantly fallen.
Do you think that this adjustment downplays the impact of food inflation on the everyday Nigerian? The National Bureau of Statistics recently rebased Nigeria's consumer price index, causing a drop in the official inflation rate. But does this statistical drop reflect the realities of the everyday Nigerian? In this episode of the podcast, we are joined by Mr. Isiaka Akande Raifu, a research associate here at CSEA, and we decode the mysteries behind the inflation numbers. You're welcome to the podcast, Mr. Isiaka.
Thank you very much.
All right, so we'll be starting with the definition of inflation. On layman terms, what is inflation?
Simply put, inflation is generally rise in price level of goods and services. That's it's not as yes.
All right, so I would like to understand what the change means. The change in the inflation calculation with the recent rebasing, with the recent calculation of the inflation statistic by the National Bureau of Statistics. So what does this change mean, and does it reflect anything for the Nigerian economy?
Let me begin by saying the purpose of rebasing the inflation.
All right.
The purpose is to reflect the dynamic change in the economy. Economies evolve over time. So it reflects, as the economy evolves, there's need to reflect it in the economic parameter or variables so that we can have up-to-date data that can inform policy formulation. So the rebase is supposed to be carried out every 5 years, or in between 5 years and 10 years. So that's it. But for the last time the rebase was done, we used the base year of 2009, and since then the economy has changed. Many things have happened that has not been captured within the economy. So the current GB is just to reflect the reality of the economy, the consumption pattern that have changed over the time when the previous when the previous rebase was done. So that's where. So it's just to reflect the changes in the economy, not to say maybe it has reflect any maybe a price level, changes in price level.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so the recent rebasing movement from the base year of 2009 to 2024 was just to reflect the change in the consumption dynamics within the economy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So that feeds into like the next question I was going to ask.
Okay.
Does this statistical change reflect any particular type of change in the standard of living of Nigerians? Because inflation rates dropped, right? So does this drop in inflation mean, okay, the prices are falling, or things are now cheaper for the everyday Nigerian?
As I said before, not that the price has fallen or the prices are falling, but it's just to show that the consumption pattern of average Nigeria have changed. And for instance, before people eat at home alone, but nowadays people eat at the restaurants, at the picnics, and everywhere. So, and people don't really go for insurance before. Now they go for insurance, and so the consumption pattern changed. Those that reflect, not that the price has significantly fallen in the market.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the next thing we're going to move into talking about is food inflation.
Okay.
Food inflation has or had a very dominant weight in inflation calculation over the past few years. So with the current rebasing of the CPI, the weight of food inflation dropped from 51.8% to 40.1%. So concerns remain that even despite this drop in the weight, food inflation would still persist, mostly because of factors such as maybe the cost of transportation or infrastructure. So do you think the rebasing risks reducing the weight of food inflation, or do you think that this adjustment downplays the impact of food inflation on the everyday Nigerian?
What NBS did was to distribute index across the 13 new classification of food baskets in the country. Before we have 12 classification, but we now have 13 classification. So the basket of products they are considering as enlarged. So, for instance, now the food inflation reduced from that above 50% to 40%. If you look at the statistics, the basket of food and the new classification, you see that the index attached to restaurants and accommodation services have changed from 0.2 to around like 12%, 12.9%. So it's just kind of a reduction of index across the new dimension of consumption pattern. Not that downplaying the impact of the food inflation. The prices are still high in the market, and but I don't think it poses any risk.
So it doesn't pose any risk to downplaying the impact of food inflation.
Yeah, the food inflation is a seasonal something. Maybe when you are off season, the food inflation can rise. When you are in a season, the food inflation can reduce. So, for instance, now during the season of harvest, you expect the food inflation to decline. During the off season, you expect it to rise a bit. Although there are a lot of drivers of food inflation, as we mentioned, transport is there, insecurity is there, the weather condition, climate condition is also there. So these factors are still there, could be driving the food inflation at any time possible.
So it doesn't necessarily have anything or much to do with the fall in the index itself.
Yeah, the index is just redistribution. That's why the index fall.
All right.
Yeah,
so we want to now understand what the policy implications for this rebasing is. Does the change in the numbers, the statistical numbers, mean better policy making? Does it mean improved policy making? What are your opinions? I
think the policy implication for the government is, when you have the inflation also affects government revenue. It affects businesses, so it affects individuals also. So the three economic agents are affected by inflation. So for the government, it will help them to have a better policy, stable policy formulation and revenue realization and all those kind of things. But for the firm, it will help them to have belief in the system that the economic environment is stable, because average investor, they are rational people. So they look at your economic parameter before investment is made within your economy. So that is only implication. It will help the government to plan properly, and then maybe a business environment to be stable and encourage investors to come to Nigeria. Yeah.
So with the current rebasing of the CPI, experts are saying that it could lead to shifts in the financial market. Right. So what do you think are the short-term or long-term effects of this rebasing on CPI on investments, like directly looking at investments now?
As I said, investors are rational economic agents, and before they come in, whether they want to invest in portfolio or they want to move their factory to the country, in terms of FDI, they need to look at your economic parameter. When you have stable inflation and your exchange rate is stable, the possibility is there that investor will come and financial market could be buoyant at that time. So that's all.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Coming on this episode of the CC Podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the CC Podcast. We hope you found these conversations as insightful as we did. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. See you next time.